Hey guys, Frontwoods Farmer, welcome back to the channel. Today we're making our homemade sauerkraut recipe. It's the fastest and simple way, easiest really, that I found of making sauerkraut out of heads of cabbage. It's very organic, and as you know, we're a homesteading based channel at heart, and that's what I figured I'd do today. Show you guys real quick kind of how I make our family's homemade sauerkraut. So you start off, depending on your crock size, how many heads of sauerkraut. We have about a 12-gallon crock. So I guess you'd say 1.5 heads to every gallon that your crock is a good start to get started on. You can critique that from there. Step one, as you've seen, was taking all the outside layers off the cabbage. How many outside layers do you ask? Well, as many as you need. Get all the brown off, all the bugs, all the holes from the worms, anything that you see that don't look fresh and green, get off. After getting all those layers peeled and I'm satisfied, I normally just bring it over to the sink. I get some lukewarm water, rinse the head off the best I can, try to get all the bugs, brown spots, dirt, anything that I see visible, I try to get off because I feed all this to my friends and family, and I just don't take any chances when it comes to food. So it's probably an unnecessary step, but it's something I've always done. Try not to get too far ahead of yourself. You can go ahead and start coring if you have another person with you or people helping you, but I find that it's a lot easier just to take one head at a time, take the outside layers off, rinse, repeat. Yeah, it's important to note too, you'll see that I'm getting that bag out. Keep all your scraps in your work area as clean as you can, because you're never going to keep this a non-messy job. Right about now, you're probably asking, how long does this all take to do? Well, when you get couple people in there that's experienced, that's done this before, it really doesn't take more than a few hours. It's a pretty long event if you've never done this, just the learning curve, but it's like anything. Once you do it, I mean, you're good. The next time you do it, you're going to kind of get better and better. Not to really jump ahead here, I'm going to explain this more towards the end of the video, but the fermentation process where this turns from cabbage to sauerkraut, it takes about 45 days. So you could expect in around 45 days for me to make a follow-up video. That's why I always tell everyone that's subscribed, make sure your bell notification's on so you get the notifications for all my new videos and you don't miss this. Because this is going to show you how to make the sauerkraut. But after the fermentation process, you're going to also want to know how to either can it or vacuum seal it. We're going to do both. That way, if you want to vacuum seal it and freeze it, you can do that. And or you can do the canning process of it. What I do when I can it is, you'll see that I cook it a little bit, but not too much. We're going to can it, and that way if you're living off grid, or you guys experience power outages, or you just want the reassurance that you're going to have your sauerkraut for a couple years, that's the way to go. So keep a lookout in 45 days for the follow-up video. Now again, I can't stress enough keeping your workspace clean. Also, the fermentation process is a fermentation process, so it's like winemaking. And if you have any experience in winemaking, a little bit of dirt is going to ruin your whole batch of wine. Sauerkraut's real similar. So what I end up doing is wiping down these counters after we peel that. That way we don't get any dirt and contaminate the sauerkraut. I just want to touch real quick on the cutter that we use. We use this Kitchen Magician. This is probably the easiest, cheapest, best cutter I found. You can normally find these on eBay, relatively inexpensive. You can use any kind of cutter or shred that you want. You don't have to have the smallest pieces or the biggest pieces. You could have mixed pieces, but this is just the way I do it, and I found it works best for us. I use the Kitchen Magician, and then you'll see the blade and the shred that I use. Now at this step, we're going to be coring. As you can tell, there's some difficulty cutting even with a really sharp, bigger knife through this cabbage, so please be really careful when you do this. What I do, a lot of people do, is cut it in half, and one step I take further is I actually quarter it. I find that it fits in the Magician a lot easier, and also it's a lot easier to core. So you start out, you cut down through the core on each half, and then you hold it at a 45-degree type angle here. Zoom in, and just like that, now your core's out. And what you want to do with that core is get rid of it. You don't want any core left in here. See how I trim a little more out? You want to you want to take all that core out that you can. And then after, I just cut it into pieces that'll fit in the Magician. Now, you don't want to cut it into too small of pieces if you don't like a fine shred, because we'll use a mixed shred. Basically, it's going to have big and small pieces and a little bit of everything. And if we would cut it into smaller pieces, we would get, even with the multiple shred setting, we would get nothing but small pieces. So keep that in the back of your mind. Now, this is where you're going to find all the hard work you've been doing starting to take shape. We're going to be shredding now. So as you can tell, it's a little bit hard to hold on to the Magician, but it's well worth it. It puts out a real nice shred on this setting. As you can see, it's real homemade style looking. You don't have too much chunk, but it's not all finely shred like it was made in a factory. And then we get a tray about the size of, say, half the head of cabbage, and then I'll dump it on one side of the crock, fill it again with the rest of the head shredded, dump it the other side of the crock, and that'll actually give us an indicator when to take it to this next step you'll be seeing here shortly. Now what we're going to do is take it over to the crock, put our first layer in, and then we're going to actually push the sauerkraut down. You want to pack that down in there pretty firmly. You're going to want to put some salt on this first layer, about, I would say, a small handful. So not a man-sized handful, about half of that, somebody's small hand. And when you push that salt down into there, that's what's going to help take place the fermentation process. It's going to kickstart it, and basically what it does is it rots. Sauerkraut's really good for you, and it's really good for your digestive system and stomach, all your overall health, really. So what you're going to want to do is push that down, salt it, and now whenever I start filling up these other pans, like I said before, you might have 4 or 5 people helping you, so it's hard to keep track of how much sauerkraut you put into the crock. So this is where I put it off to one side, because if we forget how much we put in and we see that it's only half filled to one side, we know we didn't put in the other pan. And if you use a pan that's about a half a head of cabbage, you want to layer this about every cabbage head. So this is a pretty good system that I thought of. And each layer, you're going to press down and compact. Now this is way too much salt, but on the bottom end, I try to put in a little more salt than I do in my next layers up to the top, just to ensure that the bottom's getting enough salt to start the fermentation process. And this will also help in preserving too. So when you go to preserve this, if you're canning it, this is really going to help. All right, guys, note the rubber glove also. That's a really good tip that I learned. Get a food grade glove, wash it off, and use that to push in your sauerkraut to compact it, because if you don't, your hands will be really tore up and you'll be in quite a bit of pain for the next couple of days. So wear a rubber glove. This is the longest part of your sour making process. Basically everything I just showed you, repeat with each head of cabbage until it's full, and then you're off to your next step here. Okay, this is the most important step in the whole process. If you get this wrong, you will not have sauerkraut from your cabbage. So once you get your cabbage all shredded in your crock, layered, packed down, salted, remember you salt each layer, you bring it down to a cool, dry place. So you want it in a basement or a wine room or a fruit cellar, and you fill up the plastic bag. You put like 4 or 5 food grade plastic bags, fill it up with water, and this is this is my secret trick here, and that makes an airtight seal. And what this will do is during the fermentation process, the gases will release out from the bags, but keep it airtight the whole time. A lot of people, they'll put a weight on a board or put a board over it. I found that this is a surefire way that your fermentation process never gets interrupted or no bacteria gets to it, and you always have it airtight. So that's what we do. This is what we always done. Now I'm going to end up doing a follow-up video in 45 days. So I'll see you guys in 45 days. That's how long you want to get your sauerkraut to ferment. Get the cabbage to turn into your sauerkraut.